and girls have found themselves at the brunt of water wars around the country. This is not just happening in Zimbabwe, but we're finding that due to climate change, there are major issues around water and access in Africa. Today, we are going to explore what the problems are with regards to climate change, but also from a structural and infrastructural perspective. What are the real issues why we have not enough water around our communities? What could be done differently in able for us to harvest water? We've got the rainy season starting now. What can we put in place to begin to harvest water and to save the little water that we have? We found that women and girls have been raped at the boreholes. Does it have to be survival of the fittest when you are fetching water? That is the conversation of today on our topic, water wars. Is it survival of the fittest? Ndonze Rejoice, Naraunda Makawa, together with Siposi Ndlovu on sign language. To help us unpack this conversation as we go to Mavuku and as we discuss this from a global perspective, we have in studio today Mr. Mfundo Mulilo. Good afternoon and welcome to Issues Pane, Nyaya. Mr. Mfundo is coming in his capacity as an urban development expert, and we are going to pick his brain and glean off him on his knowledge of what could be going wrong, what could we do differently in terms of water. Just to get us started, is the water problem a reality?
Yes, it is a reality, not only in Mavuku, but citywide, but also nationally. I think we have seen problems in Bulawayo. Bulawayo has always had water problems, I think, for the last 20 years. In Harare here, we've always had incessant water problems, I think, for the last 20 years also. And they've led to disease outbreaks, cholera, typhoid, even loss of life. So these are problems that have existed, I think, for a long time now. Yes.
But the water issues are not just unique to Zimbabwe. Can we start the conversation there and just talk about the African perspective, for example, with regards to access to water?
Yeah. I mean, water problems are they're a global phenomenon. I think recently I saw a report released by WHO, where they were also talking about that, one of the global threats is issues of climate, and then which then flow into issues to do with water. Yes, so water is increasingly fresh water available for human consumption is a big issue. I think last year we saw even in South Africa, particularly in Cape Town, where they were moving towards day zero, that they were getting to a point where there virtually will be no water to drink for Cape Townians. So luckily they came together and managed to save water, and they've averted the crisis. But they are not out of danger because of the climatic patterns we are seeing. Here in Zimbabwe again, we are having serious water problems as a result of climatic patterns, but also in the manner in which we are managing our own water bodies, and also the manner in which local authorities themselves are managing this scarce resource. So water is indeed fresh water is indeed scarce on an African and also global scale.
So just bringing it back home and talking about Zimbabwe as a nation, we know that there's stuff that our city fathers could be doing differently. There's more that could be done. Do you want to just begin to touch on that before we go and look at the situation in Mavuku as a case study?
Yeah. So at a national and perhaps a regional scale, where you're talking about Harare municipality and also at the government level, there are principal three things that make water available. Do you have a climate that supports, a fresh water availability? So Zimbabwe is one of the most damed countries, meaning we have a lot of, dams. But at the same time, the last water body built for Harare, I think for Zimbabwe, was in 1976. So we have not been catching up in terms of infrastructure. So at the highest level, you have
an infrastructural problem.
Yeah, so you have climate. Does your climate support availability of fresh water? Yes, to some extent we do. And then secondly, is the government putting enough infrastructural support to ensure that when the water comes, we are able to store it. Yeah. And then at a local authority level, do we have sufficient resources to ensure that we purify this water that is available and then make it available to citizens? So at those three levels, that's where we are seeing problems. So on all those three levels, is the climate changing? to affect water. Yes.
Yes, it is.
Is government building enough dams or putting up infrastructure? Because before 2004, there was something called the Public Sector Investment Program. So is it still available to support this infrastructure? And then at the local authority, does City of Harare have money,
capacity.
US dollars, to purify water? So that is where the issue is.
And that makes it a huge issue with
That makes
no
it a-
foreseeable solution. Yeah, do you agree?
Yes, it does. I mean, City of Harare does not have the foreign currency to treat water. I think they need about 10 chemicals to treat water for for Harare, which goes up to about 2.5 million US dollars a month. Then if you look at their own RTGS collections, they can't support that kind of a huge bill for water purification chemicals. So for Harare, the main issue actually is that we do not have enough chemicals to purify water, because at a demand management level, with the amount of water we have, we can be able to provide water if we can purify enough water to make it available to citizens. For Bulawayo, it's a different story.
Now citizens expect to get water, but there's a responsibility that citizens hold as well in terms of paying for the services of water. Do you want to just speak to that?
Yes, citizens in Harare, residents in Harare have not, they used to pay. So I'm running away from a situation whereby I blame citizens because
we're not blaming
yes,
anybody.
they do have a responsibility to pay, because the city can't afford to provide water without the money. So the money is the contract. But then remember that water is a right. So it cannot be a chicken and egg.
It cannot be withheld.
It's a chicken and egg situation that you have to pay us in order to provide the services. The local government has a constitutional obligation to ensure that water is available by virtue of the constitution. So the fact that we residents are not having water, there is a serious constitutional violation of rights. Of rights. So yes, the citizens have to pay to ensure that local authorities have the money to deliver the services. But the discussion should be these citizens, these residents have rights which must be respected in terms of ensuring that the right to water is realized.
And I'd like to bring that aspect out as we carry on in the conversation and have the human rights practitioner in you speak to the human rights violations there in terms of provision of basic rights that are expected, the fundamental human rights. But before we do that, we're just going to go across to Mavuku and see, and when we come back after the break, we will be in Mavuku, just seeing what is happening in Mavuku and picking up the conversation from there. Do stay with us. Don't go away as we take a break. We will be back in Mavuku after the break. Generally, society has a tendency of shying away from tackling matters that disrupt the status quo. Instead, such discussions are either avoided. As a result, attitudes are created and truth reinvented. On this platform, we dare to venture into those territories. This is Issues Pane, Nyaya. Timi mugere muno matiri kunzwa maita dambudziko renyaya yemvura mene kuti zvakamirawo sei?
Dambudziko rino rakanyanya ende handisi kugona kupinda here nokuti kana rakubudikidza rakusvika matambudziko ekuti vana vanosipesana vakurepwa kana vana mai vakuzotoerwa mumvura vachimukira kuburidza nemukira usiku handioni zvakanaka.
Tiri kunzwa kuti kuno kwakaitika dambudziko remudzimai kana kuti mudzimai nemwana. Handizivi kuti vanokwanisa kunyatsotitsanangurira vanogara pedyo navo ndevapi vangakwanisa kutitsetsenurira kuti zvakafamba sei?
Ndingati amai togara ndi next door wangu. Musi wacho taifanira kutomuka tese asi ndakangoita usimbo kuti ndimukire navo. Ndobva wamuka nevana vavo vatatu ndobva vaenda kumvura. vachira mvura dzavo tinoti tikasvika zviya zvinochera mvura dzedu togadzikapo tozopota tichitakura saka vachira mvura yavo vakutodzoka kumba ndopa vakasangana nemunhu akati pakutanga vakadonhedza chigubhu vadonhedza chigubhu matauro avaita hanzi vakangoti ndobva taka chigubhu chavo bvasa padenga ndobva vafamba vanzo mumwe musikana akanga ari mumashure umu hamene zvaakanzwa ndobva amhanya akati ndoda kuenda pamberi pana amai vakati kochii pasina nguva vanoti izvo ndakangonzwa masteps kumashure mangu handobva ndati ndobva watocheuka saka vanga vari 3 paipa ndobva wasvika ndobva kugadzika vamwe vacho vanasikana 2 vakatoputsa mabhaketsi akatofa mai ndobva watora chigubhu ndobva wamira pasaiti matauro avaita handobva ndamira ndobva mumwe mwana abva amhanya achiuya achichema achimusa achiuya kuzomutsa baba apa vakasara paya matauro avaita vaiti izvoni akati komwe mwana wamamine aenda kupi aenda kudaidza vanhu saka ndoda kuti ndikuratidze kuti ndiri murume handobva bvisa jaketi rake ranga inobva rikanda padombo paakatikanda padombo paya musikana wanga ainaye anzi akatorwa iye ari kuti inenge banga kana kuti screw driver here yakamurwa pachipfuva nepamhanza asi akakwanisa kuzotora screw driver yendobva aipotsera musango iye akatorwa pamhanza zvokuti pari zvino huma yake iri yakatoita chibunduso kurohwa kwakaita saka pari zvino zvokutoti ivo mai vacho pakazotanga kurwisana naye akanga kuti ndipe mwana wako ndienda naye akati mwana wangu haumutore ndopa vakatanga kuchirwisana ipapo svika handizori zvakazofamba sese munhu anenge akuzongotsanangudza hose zvokuti zvinoda kuti pamwe simbi yake yanga inayo ndo yakatemesa futi amai vatokwara imwe zina rakatodonhera ipapo amwe acho ese ari kutosheka
izvozvo ane mazina ari kutosheka
izvozvo andoni mazina ari kutosheka ndo mafambiro azvakaita
saka zvinoreva chii manje kumunhukadzi nemwanasikana agere munzvimbo ino panyaya yekuti kunochera mvura tichiri safe here kana kuti zvaakutyisa zvinorevei kwatiri semadzimai nevanasikana
zviri kutotirwadza
nokuti ugare mumba usina mvura
wautongogara uchitya
kuti ubude kuenda kumvura kwakutyisa
ukangoona munhurume wako
saka tiri panguva yakaoma tatakukumbirawo varidzi venharaunda sitoharare ngaiwo nezvibito nesu madzimai nokuti utunzi mudzimai kana kuti unzi musha pasina mvura hauna kwaunoenda kana iwo utano hwavari kutaura imvura
manje mamiriro azvakaita ndeyekuti mvura hakuna ende hazvisi kutarisirika kuti mvura ichauya padhuze saka zvakureva kuti tisu semacommunities takufanira kutoona kuti tozvichengetedza sei handiziva kuti zvizvo zvimwe zvamuri kuronga semacommunities kuti muchengetedzeke kana muchinochera mvura
semacommunities si semadzimai takutoti kana tienda kunochera mvura tinotobuda tiri chiguru takawanda todedzana toenda kunochera mvura nekuti kutobuda muri 3 takatozviona kuti hazvisi safe
akamboti basa rekuchera mvura ibasa remunhurume revakadzi ndiani
hakuna akazvironga asi mukugara takatarisa vana baba kavanozviti baba varidzi vemusha asi nyaya iripo ndeyekuti vanozvitutumadza kuti handichere mvura handisuki handitsvaira handibiki nyange mukazvitarisedza munhu akaenda kumunda chaiye mukaenda munda mese maswera munda mese baba unosvika tigara pamvura asi unosvika tanga kuziva kuti kurura kutsvairwa kuda kusukwa kuda kubikwa ukuvabikira futi gose vaita zvese ungozogara futi navo futi kumunda saka munongoona kuti madzimai tiri vanhu vakagara vakangoremedzwa pamusoro pazvo tobara pamwe wakatakura mimba uku pamwe mwana wacho kumusana uchibva futi kumunda ikoko svinga rehuni pamusoro saka
kana vana vane basa chabonde
saka hatizivi kuti tingagona kuti zvigadziriswe seiko zvinhu
zvikada ndofunga panoda kuti isusu semadzimaika tiwane kuziva kuti mutemo chaiwo unoti chii pamusoro pemunhukadzi mamwe dzimwe kodzero dzatinadzo muconstitution hatidzi-tore tichinatsodziona kuti dzakakosha kwatiri ende pamwe pacho kusatodziziva kunoita kukonzera kuti timbunyikidzwe ini nababa tise tikaziva kuti ikodzero yemunhu wese kuwana mvura zvinoda kuti tinongonotsvaga tese tichiita sei tichionesana mutemo yedu semadzimai dzimongwa iri kumbunyikidzika nekusaiziva munhu anoenda pakiliniki otadza kunorapwa otodzoka kumba handina kuziva mutemo kuti unoti ndine kodzero yekurapwa pachipatara kana ndichinge ndasvikapo saka dai zvabatsirika kuti madzimai tizive mutemo taikwanisa kurarama zvakanaka pamwe society yaigona kubatsirika ikachinja
zvamuri kutaura zvinogamuchirika zvakanyanya zvatotipawo isusu homework sevanhu vemedia kuti pamwe hatisi kunyanyopa nguva yakakwana kunyaya dzekudzidzisa vanhu mutemo kuburikidza nemaredhiyo, kuburikidza nematv nemaconversation atinoita iwaya, matotipa chitsvambe chekuti tiende tinopota tichiramba tichikufundisai mutemo. Asi tiri ipapo handizive kuti ndikauya ndakabipitira constitution ndichisikoiti kuna baba, constitution inondipa kodzero, zvinozoita kuti mvaimo mugarike here. Zvaida kuti paite imwe mamwe makurukuriro asiri ekuti ndiri kunyatanga ndasimudza mutemo kuti mba macho mugarike. Handizive zvangu.
Ndinozvinzwisisa. Hatifanira kunge tiri confrontational about nyaya dzeconstitution, asi kuti chinhu chinofanira kukudzwa matiri as a community. Tikangoda kuchibatira pamusoro zveshuwa chinotikonzera maproblems mudzimba, asi chikauya chichiitwa ingrained in us zvishoma nezvishoma nezvishoma, pamwe zvikada vana vedu vatiri kukudza vachava generation inonzwisisa kuti kodzero dzemunhu wese dzinochengetedzwa uye dzakanakirei.
Aiwa, zvamataura zvakanaka zvikuru. Tinokutendai nenguva yenyu, ticharamba tichidzoka tichikurukura nemi isusu veissues pane nyaya yemazvita.
Zita ndodzi Hardlife Mudzimba, ndoshandira kusangano reCommunity Water Alliance.
Community Water Alliance munoita nezvei?
Tinoita zvinhu zvitatu. Chekutanga tino maprogram edu aita pane zvinonzi WASH, Water Sanitation and Hygiene. Chechipiri nyaya dzenharaunda dzeenvironment. Chechitatu dzeclimate, mamiriro ekunze. So ndo zvinhu zvitatu zvatinoita muno.
Nyaya yanga yakatiunganidza pano yanyanya kurerekera kunyaya yesafety yemadzimai nevanasikana mucommunity kana vachinochera mvura. Handizivi kuti kana muchisaita pekuchera maboreholes, security and issue munoita mucommunity here, zvinofamba sei pamunozoita determine pamunenge muchiisira mvura?
Hongu tinoita izvozvo. Kunotanga kuitwa hurukuro nelocal district office. Totarisa pane mapaipi esuwa neemvura kuita kuti tisadamage property local authority. Chechipiri tinotsvaga vana mazvikokota vanoita inonzi geophysical survey yekutarisa panowanikwa mvura. Tapedza izvozvo tinozotarisa nyaya dzesafety neaccessibility kuti panzvimbo dziri kuenda idzodzo hadzikwanisi kukanganisa here vachanga vachera mvura ipapo. Senyaya yatiri kurukura kunoku yekuti madzimai akusangana nematambudziko ekubatwa chibharo nevanhu vanenge vachidi vakavataimira panoenda kumabohos.
Saka handisi kuziva kuti zvabuda mumusangano uyu zvichaenda kumberi zvamungade kuitawo share nesu nemaviewers edu ndezvipi?
Pane zvabuda nhasi zvatichakwanisa kuita kuno kunzvimbo kunoku tine rubatsiro rwatiri kupiwa neUNICEF. Isusu seCommunity Water Alliance takabatana neve-WHH inonzi World Hunger Hive. Saka tine mabohos atichange tichiisa kunoku masolar powered water kiosk. Saka tichatsvaga nzvimbo dzakachengetedza dzatinoona kuti pane rima tichaisa masolar lamp, masolar powered lamps kuitira kuti vakadzi vasawane njodzi dzavari kusangana nadzo. Uye tichatanga taita hurukuro nevanhu. Nhasi ndo yatatanga, tichatanga nawo kuitira kuti even pakutsveta nzvimbo tinge tichikurukura pamwe chete nawo. Saka ndo zvinhu zvatichatarisira kuti tichange tichiita kuti tisaise madzimai panjodzi yakasiyana. Asi zvekarewo tichakurukurawo nemapoka ehurumende kubva kuCity of Harare, guta reCity of Harare, neMinistry of Finance kuti patiri kuenda kugore riri kuteera takatarisa nyaya dzebudget. Ngatitarisei nyaya yemvura itibatsire kuti tirijise dambudziko rekusangana nemadzimai, nekuti dambudziko ratinaro muno nderekuti tine nzvimbo inotongwa nevanhurume zvekuti mabasa asina mari anounza akaita sekuchera mvura anosiyirwa madzimai. Saka tikagadzirisa anonzi masocial service delivery issues mubudget zvinotibatsira zvakakura zvikuru. Saka tichakurukura nehurumende kuti zvakadaro zviitike. Tikutarisirawo kuti pakapuwa budget rine uwandu hunosvika 15% zvichienda mberi kwemakore 5 akateedzana tingagadzirisa dambudziko ratinaro.
Tisati tasvika kubudget mukuguma hazvigone here kuti isusu sevanhu, isusu semacommunities, imimi sana baba vari munharaunda mumbochitanga kuenda unocherawo mvura murimi kuitira kuti hanzvadzi, vanamai nevanasikana vachengetedzeka?
Sekukurukura kwandanga ndichiita apo tine dambudziko rekuti vanhu vanofunga kuti mudzimai atakure peri remvura pamusoro apo iculture, haini hunhu. Aiwa, hausi hunhu, handiho hunhu hwedu, iculture, chijairira chatakangoita kubva kumashure ndobva chapaswa kubva pageneration yekutanga ichienda inoteera. Isusu chatotarisira seCommunity Water Alliance ndechekuti kuchera mvura ngainge riri basa remunhu wese, vana baba nanamai. Tisatarisire chete kuti vanamai ndo vanofanira kutora mutoro wemvura. Ngatibatsiranei pakuchera mvura. As long as mvura isiri kuwanikwa patepi pari zvino, ngatibatsiranei tese. Kumamishawo tinoona vana baba vane mabhara vachisa mvura muzvigubhu vachinobva kumatsivi kana mungoro vachiuya vachidi saka ngazvingoita zvimwe chete izvozvo panguva yatiri. It's unfortunate kuti taitarisira kuti inofanira kunge ichiwanikwa patepi dai tisina njodzi dzese dzatiri kusangana nadzo, asi vana baba tese ngatiite chirwirangwe. Sekutaura kwandaita haisi nyaya yeunhu, hachizo chinonzi unhu hwedu iculture chete chijairira chatakaita, saka ngatigadzirise ipapo kuti zvinhu zvitifambire zvakanaka.
Chatiunza pano nhasi inyaya dzakati wandei dzatasangana nadzo dziri mumusha menyu. Nyaya iri kutaurika panapa inyaya yekuchengetedzeka kwemwanasikana nemudzimai kana vachienda kunzvimbo dzekuchera mvura. Pane nyaya iri kubuda mumapepa nawo yevamadzimai maviri here kana kuti mai nemwana vakanga vachinochera mvura vachibva vasangana nedambudziko ravakasangana naro remurume aida kuvabata chibharo. In the end, in what appears to have been self-defense, it appears that there was a fatality. And what is your comment towards that?
I think it's a sad situation, and it's something that we have warned the local authorities about, because the water problem has been persisting ever since 2000, and it's a big challenge because there's no tap water in Mavukutafara, and because of maybe pipes or something from the city council. But yeah, it's a sad story, and it's very painful.
So we are now talking about a fatality that has already occurred, but we still have women and girls going every day to fetch water and needing to do this on a daily basis. According to our research, we found that in a normal household, they need at least 200 liters of water a day. What is it that you are putting in place in order to begin to manage that challenge?
When I came in 2018, August, there was big crisis, water crisis in this constituency. So we started by drilling boreholes. We have managed to have 15 more boreholes, the whole constituency, and some of the boreholes they are solar powered and they've got taps, so to assist the elderly and women. And I know it's not enough because we have got a huge population, and what I think could be the solution is to have back city council water in this constituency, so that atifanane nekumusha kwekuti vanhu vanonofamba vachinosvika kumusha ndikwazoda kuendwa kumatsime kunochera mvura vachitsika vachidzoka. But as long as the situation ichiramba yakadaiwo, as long as hurumende isingagadzire madams anenge achitisimbisa kuti tinogadzirana kunji, because kunji kwatiri nemusami dziri padyo nesuo, chekuti madhamu iwayo inini maonero angu akagadzirwa anoita kuti mvura kuno kuita se tinge tichiwanawo iri mvura yakachena, iri mvura yakati wandei. Uyezve hatisogumira ipapo pakumirira hurumende. I'm also mobilizing more solar powered boreholes, so that apaite pressure in terms of kudhaya maborehole, because I know kuti zvinorema, I know kuti anamai avakwanisi kuramba vaita se vachidhaya, and I know kuti the elderly, because this is an elderly community, tina nambuya vakawanda vari munomu, and I know and I understand that they cannot pump maborehole. So we'll try to bring in like we are doing as we speak, solar powered boreholes and not tapes, so that this is access.
Toda kuti ndende basa rakanaka rekuti muri kuita kuti community menyu muwanike mvura. Asi manje mubvunzo wangu wochiti the current situation and the prevailing problem that we have is that women and girls are facing this challenge vachienda kunochera mvura. What security measures are you putting in place to protect them? Imimi se sasadunu.
Well, and I understand, and I also, I always fight for the girl child, because I'm born out of a woman, so I respect women. But the security issues, I think we've managed to kutaura ne police, and we had a meeting ne Mabuku police to say, why can't we then activate the neighborhood watch committees? Because we know the police manpower when not just manpower, even the vehicles, they cannot patrol the whole constituency at once, and we understand that. But there's now need to say, as an alternative, let's activate my local neighborhood watch committees Wanta kuti during the night, one of our mascot, at least there are eyes everywhere. But manheru, at least we need that patrol so that makuma area by area is safe. Shakatanga kare kujanje tinayo about community janje tinayo matapi is coming and my prayer and the whole constituency in those committees so that maybe to try to assist the police in terms of bringing security and sanity in the community.
Wonderful. Takanzwa kuti tinotoziva zvekare kuti nyaya yema-water barons inyaya yakatongofararira nyika yese kwese kusina mvura kuri kunzi pabhoho rega rega panenge paina water baron. Handizivi kuti pane zvinokwanisa kuitika here to identify ma-water baron iwayo and to bring them to book, nekuti vamwe vacho vari kunzi vanozomanikidza vana kutanga wandida kuti uwane mvura kana kuti ujambe queue and things like that.
Yeah, I think in this constituents, what we try to do, in fact, we've managed to identify all the water sources that we have, word by word. And what we then do is to come up with committees that run each and every water point. So that Paneta ka order in leadership can provide. So what these leader water point leaders do is they have a database of the area you supply mvura. So already so fight that through bringing in my water committees. I know kuti mukurarama you can know I'm 100%. Vari koma bullies, vari koma kuti nyange paine vanhu obula even that water committee. But tine proper engagement ne police and the particular meetings edu ezemvura nezima water points. The police is always there so that those challenges when they are surrendered to the police and but before that water baroning was ndofunga vachidiki vese vemusombo vakomana vanga vaitorarama nekutengesa mvura, but we managed to reduce it. We know we cannot stop it, but we managed to reduce it kusvika palevel yekuti ezvinezvi tinotoziva kuti kana chembere inowana mvura kana pamba pakadai pakarwariwa mvura ipo inofanira kuti iende because there's some order takaisa mawater all the water points.
Tanga tiona vana baba vakawanda pamusangano waitika apa. Imwe pfungwa yoti ko honorable vadi kuti vana baba ava vapote vachiperekedza vana mai nevanasikana kana vakuenda kunochera mvura kuti vachengetedzeke munzira. Handizive kuti pfungwa iyoyo munoionawo sei kuti ingagamuchirike here nemunhurume, nekuti munhurume anogonawo kungojima bhaketi haazorisa zvake pamusoro, asi kana ungoribatawo achiperekedza mai kana mwana wake kumvura.
Inini handito maybe amwe ndisingatowirirane nekuti vanonzi baba chiperekedzai mai kana kuti baba chiperekedzai mwana. Isusu timbori family tisi pamwe chete. Kana kuchityisa baba magara mlongoni kunotyisa baba ngaenda anochera mvura kana ivo vasagona kubata bhaketi aiwa vanga vachiputa chingoro kana bhara kuti mvura kana nekuti haungasasike mwana wako, haungasasike mudzimai wako, haungazorarama zvakanaka ukanzwa kuti kana kuti mwana wako iwo arepwa kana kuti mukadzi wako unogara nemba iwo ndiyese ndiye arepwa kana kuti wopane exo chaiwo handifunga kuti unorarama pfungwa makumi zvakanaka kana iriyo hondo yatinayo zvinezvi kuti pava safe tichimirira kuti other social measures dzinge dzichiiswa varume ngatimboendai kumvura. But inini ndine mumwe muono kuti I think mvura yekunwa aitorwe kure because mawater points edu isusu ari area based ari marine. Vamwe zvavo vanomukira usiku I know kuti nyaya kuti vanozoa pressure nechivaenda mwoyo mwana vaenda kupi vanda kumabasa. I understand them. So kana pakadaro then ana baba ngatiteuchi ngationa TV kudzimba kuti nevana vakomana vanongoswera vagara magoronga. Vamwe vacho vari kuita zvekungodhakwa chimadrugs nechi ko ngatokurudzira kuti vana imi vakomana instead kuti mungogara mugoronga chimbonochera mvura so that we save our girl child, we save ana mai.
Welcome back to the third and final segment of Issues Pane, Nyaya, where we were talking to the community of Mavuku as they shared the struggles that they are facing with water. We established before we went for the break that this is a global issue and it's a national issue in Zimbabwe. We have in studio with us today Mr. Mfundo Mlilo, who's just taking us and talking us through, helping us unpack the conversation. Mr. Mlilo, you heard the issue in Mavuku and all the struggles that women and girls especially are going through. The first thing that I'd like us to touch on is the issue of women being raped, or the sexual violence issue around water. Do you want to just speak into that as a human rights practitioner?
I think it's unacceptable that the local authority, through Mayor Jacob Mafume, and also the government through its Department of Social Welfare, even Parliament of Zimbabwe hasn't taken an active step in ensuring that they protect women and girls, because the issue of vulnerability of women and girls is an issue that has been going on for a long time. But the cases are actually increasing. This issue that we were watching here of a murder case where a woman had to disempower a man who was trying to rape their own daughter. We have also had cases of young kids who have fallen into this pits, and some of these kids have actually died. We have had cases of pregnant women falling into some of these. I think there was a woman who gave birth after falling into a well. Yeah. So there are many cases, and when you listen to them, you'd think that by now there should either have been a parliamentary commission of inquiry into what exactly is happening in Mavuku, because these are serious human rights violations. The Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission hasn't commented on these issues. We expect that the city of Harare should have been taken to task. Does the city of Harare have a gender desk to deal with these issues? So I think that as a society, we've let women and girls down because there's an ongoing crisis, but we have not given it the due attention that it deserves.
Before we went for the break, you also started talking about the constitutional provisions with regards to fundamental human rights. And we were talking about water being a fundamental human right. And when it's not accessible, it means that there's a breach of rights. What is it that people can begin to do, citizens can begin to do when there's a violation like that?
So it's two-way, both supply side and demand side. On the demand side, which is because these residents, there are many residents group, Combined Harare Residents Association, Community Water Alliance, and Harare Residents Trust. There are many of these community groups. I think that they should take this issue into their own hands and take these issues to court and ensure that their voices are heard. They need to petition Parliament, because sometimes taking an issue to court that doesn't give you the results. It can give you a Pyrrhic victory. A month ago, CRA Community Water Alliance took an issue around clinics, that City of Harare clinics should be opened. We know City of Harare has dragged their legs on opening the 42 clinics. So the court route is a viable route, but sometimes it doesn't give us the results we are looking for. So we need to go and push Parliament, because Parliament, is the guardian. I think Section 182 does give Parliament, the right to superintend over local authorities, so it can investigate what's going on. The Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission must be petitioned, and all these avenues are well within the communities, but also the communities must begin to sit down and see what other community initiatives can be put in place. But you see, we have been talking about community initiatives for a very long time, and these place huge burdens on communities. So we're saying, hey, come up with your own. It takes money, it takes time, it takes a lot of effort for communities to invest their time, to invest their resources. The main culprit here is the city of Harare and the government of Zimbabwe. We need to ensure that they comply with their own obligations. But what I have observed over 15 years working in the local government sector in Zimbabwe, in Harare particular, you will see that there has never been a focus on your rights. So if you read the current budget for the state of Harare, and even for the last 10 years, I've analyzed all those budgets. There is not that preconceived thinking that we are delivering rights. So they don't deliver rights. They say they deliver services. But these services must be in fulfillment of particular rights.
Yeah,
if you go to the city of Johannesburg, our neighbor, at the top of their budget, the inclination is we are delivering the right to water, the right to work for vendors, the right to a clean environment, and all those rights then cascade into programs. So that's why I always ask the question, we are talking about buying these cars, we are talking about all these, what rights are you fulfilling? So until we change the mindset that our local authorities are bodies that are supposed to discharge rights, we are always going to miss it, because when they see this crisis, they see it, it's not a service delivery crisis, it's a human rights crisis. People are not enjoying the constitutional rights as enshrined in the constitution we adopted in 2013.
Now, when there's a violation of rights, you will find that women, there's a gendered violation of rights, and you will find that women and girls are at the core of those violations. And so going back to the issue of safety for women and girls, with some of the proposals that we are giving is, why can the men not go and fetch water? What is your view on men going to fetch water?
Well, I think that men should go out there and, and fetch water. But this is a societal, long-term, it can be a short-term conversation, but it can also be a long-term conversation, because it has got its own implications around even domestic, domestic violence. So we should have this conversation with men in communities, residents associations, local residents group must begin to have conversations with men in communities around ensuring that the boys and the men go into these water points.
So it's a mindset.
It's a mindset. It's a mindset. Yes.
A whole movement of shifting how people view things,
exactly.
how culture is done, and because this man would have been sleeping at home, whilst his wife and daughter have gone out to fetch water, and his son and him are probably at home. So those are conversations that we need to begin to have. Do you think that as the media we're doing enough to initiate these conversations?
I don't think that we are doing enough. If you go into the stories, you'll be surprised about the extent of violations that are going on at water points. That there are people who can actually man a borehole and prevent women from getting water.
They take charge and
they take charge if they don't get sexual favors, or is it touching favors or whatever, or looking favors. Then women are not going to get water, and yet the men, our boys and ourselves are seated at home, and all these violations are going on. This is why I said, if the conversation does not start with the delivering rights, we are always going to get it wrong, because other cities right now, they've got what we call Safe Cities campaign, leaving no one behind.
And what does that encompass?
So what that encompasses is, how do we deliver services in a manner that is gendered, in a manner that looks at how are women and men accessing these services, how safe are cities, because these violations do not only happen with at water points, even at city centers. Our daughters, our sisters, when they are walking to in the city, there's a lot of sexual harassment. It's because we have not thought about delivering the service, even the transport service, as a human right. If we begin to think like that, then we will develop a Safe Cities campaign and say, as the city of Harare, how do we ensure that these places are safe? Because by simply going to put a water point, we have solved half the problem. In fact, we have created other bigger problems: sexual violation, rape, and many other things.
So what advice do you have for our communities that are facing these challenges? What are you saying to them? How can we begin, for example, rainy season has started. What can we do differently in terms of harvesting water?
Well, there are many community initiatives that residents group, the residents themselves can come up with. I think one of them, we're already hearing it around community policing. So we need to have a greater and strengthen the relationship with the police, because we know that the police are already stretched. But if we involve the community, and the community policing is a global phenomenon. If you go to South Africa, go to the US, go to the UK, where crime has reduced, it is because the communities themselves have taken an active interest. So the communities in Mavuku must have a greater conversation with the police, so with the expertise of the police, with their resources, and then the human resource involvement of the community. We can be able to reduce or even eliminate eliminate crime. And once we do that, there are lots of businesses within our communities that are benefiting by our presence, or by virtue of being a presence. In Mavuku, there's a multi-million-dollar company, a Circle Cement. So that company, what is this contribution? Because the health of that community is at stake because of the cement that they're producing there. So how much have they put into community's program? So as we go to government, let's remember that the private sector is benefiting from our own community. So we need to approach that's cement
private
company,
sector.
the private sector,
and talk about
and talk about there are a lot of shops.
responsibility, yeah.
Yes, there are a lot of shops there. What are those companies? There's also another big company just right across the road. So there are big corporates there that can be approached, and we need to ensure that we begin a conversation to say these people, they're getting our money, they're getting our resources. What contribution have they made?
What are they giving back?
What are they giving? So communities can come up with a lot of initiatives at their own level. And I think that once they do that, government and the local authorities can then follow up on many of these initiatives.
At household level, what can we do? I'm really interested in people. I've seen people lay out buckets when it's raining, put them at the end of the gutters, and they're fetching water and gathering water as it's falling.
Yeah.
Do you want to speak to that?
Yes, I think that that is a short-term solution because our rainfall patterns also are changing. So it will give you 2 days, 3 days of of water. We need to harvest also as the water comes. But those are solutions that give you relief on a very
temporary
on a very temporary level.
Yeah.
But we should encourage people to be able to save. It's not only about collecting water, but about creative use of the water. And also there are technologies now that help us
integrate
the water that we drink and the water that we dispose. How do we manage those two so that we reduce recycling our water? But I always go back and say we are placing a lot of burdens
on the
community. And remember, once the burden goes to the family, the person who bears that responsibility
is the woman.
Is the woman.
Yes. Yeah. It is the woman that bears the brunt of that. But we also, just thinking about the global phenomenon of limited access to water and shortage of water itself because of climate change, what can you suggest in terms of just in managing our environment better?
So the government of Zimbabwe has got what they call the national climate, I think it's national climate change strategy. So most local authorities, and I know City of Harare has not localized that plan. So it begins with how do we localize our national climate strategy into our own local authorities. And if we localize, then we will begin a larger conversation around managing the wetlands. Because you see, I saw, yes, City of Harare has been thinking about that. But as you talk to officials within the local authority, you can tell that we do not have that thinking that Harare is a wetland, is a wetland seat. Because there's a lot of construction going on these wetlands, approval of construction on wetlands. So once you approve construction of wetlands, you are destroying the entire water system of the city. This is why Harava Dam is almost, it's almost dry now. And why? Because someone was given a contract to do bricklayering on the banks of that river, and the river is dry now. How does that happen with a local authority in place, with the whole Department of Planning in place?
So there are a lot of oversight issues.
There are a lot of oversight issues that are that are going on there.
Okay, so in closing, your final words to our viewers concerning this topic?
Well, in closing, it's two parts. I think the first thing, I'll go back to my thesis that these things happen at three levels. At a community level, there are quite a few issues that we could deal with. The first one, obviously, is the mindset change. What can we do to ensure that women and girls are protected as we get the water from these, from these water points? At a local city level, we need a transformation strategy for City of Harare that protects our water bodies, that protects, our wetlands. But also, we need a conversation between local government and the central government and the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe around access to foreign currency, because we are spending a lot of money buying chemicals
that could
without buying chemicals. So if we don't buy chemicals, it simply means even if the water is there.
So there's a budgeting conversation.
There's a serious budgeting conversation, and right now the budget process is going on. And I can assure you, the State of Harare does not have a department that looks at how this budget will impact on us as residents of this state. So so even as we speak, there is no solution. And there's no conversation around how the solution would come. And then at the government level, the Minister of Finance, Minister of Water needs to think seriously around building new dams, making resources available to ensure that the issue of water is effectively dealt with.
And for that reason, we will continue with this conversation. Thank you so much for coming on to Issues, Pane Nyaya. And thank you very much to our viewers for participating. Thank you for the messages that have come through. Thank you for asking the questions that you're asking, which we will begin to tackle in part 2 of the conversations, the infrastructural issues, what could be done better. Somebody was asking about our maintenance. How is that going? What is the pipe work looking like at the moment? So we will look at all that in part 2 of water wars within the nation of Zimbabwe. Thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. Thank you to our sign language interpreter, Siposile Ndovo, and our partners, Deaf Zimbabwe Trust. Ndinonzi Rejoice, Naraunda Makawa. Until next time, stay safe.